Mr.
from
Poilievre, the
We
floor
charity,
isn't yours.
Be to We Foundation,
Mr. Poilievre?
without prior consent or approval
Mr.
by
Poilievre,
Canada.
do I have to suspend this meeting? Because I will.
There will be a ballot for the leadership and deputy leadership of the Labor Party at 4:30 today. In the meantime, take me shot.
Enormous. You're providing access to the Trudeau family. Don't you understand or realize that that puts the Prime Minister into a serious conflict by you setting this up and paying the family to do this? Because this is the first part of the question, we have you setting the Prime Minister up by your actions in a conflict, but then we understand after the mass layoffs in March that you pushed out a document to various ministers. That's you lobbying, and yet you're not registered to lobby, and you're very surprised and can't understand how this all, is going wrong for you. The reason we have the lobbying registry is so we can track how groups like yours interact with government. With you going under the radar, we don't have a clue, so we have to trust you. But I think the issue is that because of the issue of conflict, the issue that we have 2 investigations ongoing, possibly a third now with Mr. Morneau, the fact that you didn't bother to register to lobby, and yet you're promoting a project that's going to net hundreds of millions of dollars. I just don't see how guys then as sophisticated as you don't recognize the obligation to follow what every other charity in the country does, to register, to be tracked, so there's accountability. It's the lack of accountability that's really given us a hard time believing you.
I'm happy to answer the 3-part question. Number 1, as to Margaret Trudeau and her speaking, she would come to multiple auxiliary events if the decision is made by Parliament that the mother of the Prime Minister should not be able to speak to events. We would happily fulfill that. She speaks to multiple charities. We did something many charities do, and frankly, to be very honest, sir, everything my mother tells me to do, I don't do. So I'm not sure if Margaret is going to influence the Prime Minister. Number 1, sir. Number 2,
you were buying the name. Come on,
Mr. Angus, you took about 2 minutes to ask the question. I'm going to give them the time to answer.
Number 2, sir, as for lobbying, we've spoken at this extensively. We're happy to speak further, sir, that based on understanding, it is a calculation on time. That understanding is such that we have looked at that matter. We understand what you're describing. Before April, we have had minimal federal funding and minimal time involved in the procurement.
So you've never reached out for funding before?
Mr. Angus, Mr. Angus, please.
That's not the appropriate definition of lobbying, sir, and I believe you know that.
Well, I think you would understand it well, too.
Sure. And then number 3, with great respect, is for trust. You trusted us with your own children for years in the program. I hope you trust us now.
I don't trust you anymore, but my children did go through your program, and since my children have been raised, I think it's a very good point. My children learned so much from you guys when you guys were a much younger operation. But I see how many young people feel. I just reading someone who wrote about leaving We, about your disregard, the toxic work environment, the disregard for rights, how we became another private sector company.
Point of order, Chair. Mr. Angus, do you have another question? Point of order from who was it? I didn't see.
Private sector company.
Mr. Sabera, as a point of order. Charlie, there's a point of order. There's a point of order on the floor, Mr. Angus. A point of order on the floor. Mr. Sabera.
Chair, the Deputy Angus was asking a set of questions, then veered off to something that was not relevant to what his question were and what we were discussing today.
That's okay. It's not now. Charlie, go to your questions.
Well, I think it's just very simple because I think it's my daughters. You guys changed their life, and I think that's fair, and I want to put that on the record. But they talked to a lot of former We staff, including one who said that We became another private company whose number 1 aim is money. And I want to work at an organization where fear is not used as a tactic to achieve an end.
Okay.
That's what I hear from the young people that my daughters worked with. So I think that should be on the record.
That's your final question, and I'll let the Kielburgers answer that. And when they're answering it, I want them to tell us, because I've heard different testimony on this today. Mr. Angus said in his remarks that going to net hundreds of millions of dollars. I want you to answer that question as well.
Sir, we are not a private company. Charity is a charity. And I know Jesse Brown's a friend of yours and he's been spreading false information, sir. But the truth
Actually, he's
is,
not a
Yeah,
friend of mine.
Mr.
I'm sorry,
Angus,
he's
you're
not
done.
a friend of
Mis-
mine. I've
Mr.
met the guy
Angus, you are
once,
done.
and that was a
You're
committee
done.
hero. I
Charlie,
met you more than I met them. So don't say he's a friend. That's cheap. Do the right thing.
sir, we'd appreciate if the facts would speak for themselves. The facts is simple. Meadowee Social Enterprise, 100% of the profits have gone to social good. We Charity is a registered charity. The impacts of our programs that have been torn apart in this political process include the fact that 70 million hours have been logged by Canadian youth to volunteer, 7,000 schools run our programs. Sir, globally, 1,500 schools and classrooms built, 200,000 children going through them, 1 million people with clean water and
You
healthcare.
didn't answer what
We're
they say about your
proud to be a
toxic work
Canadian
environment.
charity,
Toxic work environment.
and we believe that as a Canadian charity, it should not be dragged over the coals for political purposes.
Well, if
okay,
you registered to
okay.
lobby,
Sorry,
you wouldn't be.
Mr. Angus,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
your
Thank you.
time is done. Now I'm going to ask this question
Mr. Chair,
myself because you said earlier that you basically we would not make money out of this. There's basically been an accusation here that you're going to net hundreds of millions of dollars. Would you answer that clearly, please? I want it clear on the record where this is at.
So if we could answer on two levels. Number one, the CSSG, we were only being reimbursed for costs, period. We would have made no money at all in this government program. And secondly, sir, on a personal level, and we've heard some very unfortunate things, and I'd like to speak to this for a moment. On a personal level, as for our family and our own parents being dragged into this now, our 80-year-old parents and some of the social media posts and whatnot.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
What's your point of order?
Yeah, you used an intervention to make a point about the amount that has been netted by this organization. They continue to say, well, they were just getting expenses reimbursed. Well, that's of course the case. We all knew that all along. When they pay expenses to themselves, that will be reimbursed under this contribution agreement.
I think we're into.
Profit in order for someone to benefit.
Mr. Poilievre, we're into debate. It's not a point of order. It's not a point of order. No, it's not.
It's a necessary one.
It's a point of debate. And when a member alleges that there's going to a net hundreds of millions of dollars, that needs to be cleared up because we have a different information on the record. And I want to know what is fact. That's the purpose of this hearing.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
point of order. I
I
know that you're really going out of your way here, but I never said that the Kielburger organization was going to be making that hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions were going to flow through their organization, and they were certainly going to get money out of that to cover, and for a group that was just in financial free fall in March, this is certainly something that could be seen as, so how much they actually get, we don't know, Mr. Chair. That's what we're here to investigate.
Mr. Angus, your exact words were going to net hundreds of millions of dollars. I wrote it down. Let's have clarity on the point. That's what I'm asking for. We need to establish the facts. And so if you gentlemen, if you could establish that, we will go on to Mr. Cooper, followed by Mr. Fraser, Mr. Cummings, and Ms. Katrakis. Gentlemen.
I want to be explicitly clear, sir. Once again, this was a contribution agreement. We were not netting hundreds of millions of dollars. That is not correct. Sir, we were doing this as a request from ESDC, and we were only going to be reimbursed for expenses.
And Mr. Poilievre, if I may.
Pay to yourself. Pay to yourself.
No, that's actually, sir, not correct.
It is correct. It's right in the agreement.
Sir.
It's absolutely correct.
Mr.
right
Poilievre, Mr. Poilievre, let's have some order.
Sir, the
It's in writing. It's right there in the contribution agreement.
Mr. Poilievre, you're on the list later on if we get that far. Mr. Craig, if you could answer.
You're going to pay the expenses to yourself.
Mr. Poilievre?
Sir, that's factually incorrect. And sir, the contribution agreement.
18.4.
Sir, please. Like
right
with
here.
Humility. With the contribution agreement defines exactly the eligible expenses, exactly.
The recipient may enter into contracts.
Mr. Poilievre, the floor isn't yours.
Meadowee Foundation.
Mr. Poilievre.
Without prior consent or approval.
Mr. Poilievre, do I have to suspend this meeting? Because I will. Now there will be order. I'll suspend the meeting, and that's it. Now it's your choice.
We'll just call him back.
It's your choice. Mr. Craig, the